What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? The election system doesn't feel very fair, but we've got FairVote with us here today to help us hopefully fix some of those problems. This is an organization that we have referenced quite a few times in the past, and thankfully they're willing to lend us some of their time so we can get information about ranked choice voting and about election reform, voting reform, straight from the people who probably spend the most time focusing on those issues. So we've got Deb Otis with us today. Deb, could you please just tell us who you are, what you do with the organization, how the organization kind of operates?
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. So I work for FairVote. We're a nonprofit, and we work on ranked choice voting and proportional representation. My job there is Director of Research and Policy, and that means a big part of my work is analyzing how different types of elections work in practice. So in all of the places that already use ranked choice voting, how is it going and what can we learn from those?
Uh, what have you guys been able to do? Well, so I think honestly, before we even get going into this, I think ranked choice voting and proportional elections are something that a lot of people don't understand, especially if it's something that they haven't had the opportunity to participate in. And so I think just right off the bat, why don't you give us the elevator pitch of what ranked choice voting is and why you are dedicating, your time to trying to make that a thing that happens.
Ranked choice voting is a way to vote where voters get to rank the candidates on the ballot in order of preference. So a lot of times when we're looking at a crowded election, an election with a lot of candidates, we have already sorted those into our mind. Like I'd be okay with any of these candidates. I really don't want any of those three candidates. And then we have to do the math. Okay, well, I only get one vote in this crowded field of candidates. Do I vote for the candidate I really like best, or do I vote for one of the candidates who seems like a front runner who really has a chance to defeat someone I hate? And so it puts voters in this weird position of doing the math. It's what leads to this lesser of two evils narrative, where even if you maybe have five candidates on your ballot, a lot of people kind of feel like you're really only allowed to vote for two of those, vote for the front runners. And that's bad for voters, and it's bad for our political system. It's driving us into this hyper polarization. And so that's where ranked choice voting comes in. By letting voters rank the candidates in order of preference, it helps incentivize better campaigning, and it gets winners who have majority support. If you ask people right now, oh, do you have to have a majority of votes to win an election? People would say yes, of course. But no, in practice, that is not true. If you have two candidates, it works great. Whoever gets the most votes, they have more than half, and they win. Awesome. But as soon as you put a third candidate in there, then all of a sudden someone can win with as little as a third of the votes. And it happens a lot. We have a lot of people in Congress and in the Senate who got way less than half of the votes. And that has to be the lowest bar. Getting half of the support of your constituents, if you want to represent people, you need at least half of them to want you there. And so ranked choice voting does that. If your first choice candidate doesn't get enough support, they get eliminated. They don't make it to the final round. So in the final round, your vote counts for your backup choice. So this frees voters to vote honestly. Just rank your favorite candidate first. Hope that they make it through. If they don't, well, you're not sidelined. You didn't waste your vote. There is no such thing as a wasted vote. Your ballot is just counting for your second choice, so you're still in it. You still get to weigh in between the candidates who really have a shot.
I think that's great. Obviously, we've been pushing for ranked choice voting. I think that it is a system that could give us better representation. I do think that a lot of people, what they're struggling with is how does that work? Do you have to then, like, I think your dad was asking if, or maybe it was Jazz's dad. I don't know. We were just talking about this with the person running for mayor,
It was
and
Jazz. Yeah, Jazz is dead.
and he was trying to explain it to his father. He's like, so does part of my vote go for one person and part of my vote go for another person? And I think like it's a relatively simple concept once it clicks, but getting it to that point of clicking is like it seems like really difficult and haven't found a great way to do that. What's I guess can you explain how this is actually working in practice in some places that have implemented it, and how like from a voter's perspective, not from the high level political perspective, but from a voter, what they do when they see their ballot, how their ballot is tabulated, how that round system works, because in a lot of ways it almost seems like you'd have to go back and re-vote every time, as people get knocked off or things along those lines. Just kind of clear all that up.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about ranked choice voting is you don't have to go back and vote again for the second round. A lot of states in the US and a lot of cities hold runoff elections where, if there's no majority winner, people do have to go back and vote again, like 3 weeks later. We see the really high profile Senate runoffs in Georgia. Seems like every cycle, folks should be, preparing for the holidays, but they're like back in line at the voting booth again. Ranked choice voting gets around that. Instead of having to go vote again between the top two finalists, you've already marked on your ballot between those two candidates, which one did I rank higher? And so your vote always counts. Your ballot counts as one vote. It just might end up counting as a vote for your second choice if your top choice was like an underdog or, a candidate who didn't make it and got eliminated. So they start up by just counting everyone's first choices. If someone already has a majority, then that person wins, just like any other election. But as we said, a lot of times in a crowded election, nobody has that majority. So if you don't have a majority winner from first choices, that's when the backup choices come into play. Eliminate that trailing candidate. In New York City, they've got this mayor's election this week, and of a dozen candidates, there are a number of them that are really down in the single-digit percentages. And so those get eliminated. And people who voted for one of those candidates, their ballot counts for their next choice. And so your vote stays in play. It always only counts once, but it might be counting for your backup choice at the end instead of your first choice. But isn't that better? Wouldn't you rather count for your backup choice rather than not count at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. So somebody in the comments here said that they thought this was a right-wing idea. I don't think that that's true. Obviously it seems like usually more conservative candidates tend to push against ranked choice voting. But can you weigh in on that one way or the other?
Yeah, we've seen support for this idea from all different types of political ideology. The idea in itself, I would say, is party neutral and ideology neutral. Like, it's not going to just help one ideology of candidates, but it does help a certain type of candidate. It helps candidates who are consensus builders and who can maybe be ranked as a backup choice by some voters who prefer their opponents. So, I would give Sarah Palin as an example of someone who really struggled with this system. Sarah Palin ran in Alaska, and she lost a couple of times under ranked choice voting because she wanted to run a really divisive campaign. And she did have this solid base of people who were ranking her first. They were like Palin or bust. But she was not popular as a backup choice. Most voters in her home state disapproved of her, and they did not rank her second. So even though she really energized one small group of people, she couldn't get those backup choices that she needed in order to kind of get over that 50% hump. Candidates who do better are those consensus builders who can appeal to more voters. We've seen some interesting examples of this in New York City. Some candidates, they say, rank me first, but if you've already decided on one of my opponents, put me second. I think, I can still fight for your community, so rank me second. And I think that's really cool.
I do too.
For sure. I was I replied to that person and was like, just look at who promoted repealing ranked choice voting in Alaska this last election cycle. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Democratic politicians that were saying that it needs to be repealed. But I don't know where the history, I think to your point, it's a political idea, the idea of just enhancing the way that you vote to make it more accurate to what you actually want out of your candidates. But I think the way that their meaning was, is this a right-wing idea, is that possibly more just anti-establishment in general, that it gives people more ability to choose what they want versus what, the DNC or GOP really is pushing as their candidate. I think if we would have had ranked choice voting in 2016 in the Democratic primaries, probably we would have saw a different nominee come out on top. But, we'll never know for sure. But it seemed like that was a very contentious way to elect a nominee. Do you guys have any sort of high-end support from the GOP or DNC at any level for instituting ranked choice voting in primaries?
Now, neither of the major parties at the national level has come out in support of this. The GOP has come out against it. They passed a resolution against this. The Democratic Party has been quiet on this so far. But we do have support from individual politicians, even if not full parties yet. And there is pro-ranked choice voting legislation in Congress right now. I would point to Jamie Raskin as someone who's been a real champion for this and who's running one of the bills.
I mean, I think just an extension of that is really ranked choice voting. If it was to benefit any particular candidate, it's usually going to benefit a third party because that, in theory, makes them at least somewhat competitive, right? In a system where, again, if you're not going to put your first vote out or your only vote if you only get the one for a person who isn't going to be a front runner and you don't think can be competitive, you're more likely to vote for your lesser of two evils that you think can defeat that person you really hated at the beginning. Where if you can go out and vote your heart at the top of your rank and then be like, all right, well, if they don't make it, then you can move down the list. That allows you to have that third party candidate be competitive in theory in those situations. But then it also, I think from a Democratic perspective, and a reason that I'm a little lost as to why they haven't really championed this system more, is third-party candidates hurt Democrats far more than Republicans. I mean, we see this across the board. Obviously, the Democratic Party is a very big tent party, and so therefore you have a lot of people whose ideals don't really perfectly align with establishment candidates who just fit under because the Democratic Party slightly represents them better than what the Republican Party does, but they want to see, the more progressive third-party candidates out there, and it baffles me a little bit that the Democratic Party hasn't been like, yeah, we should jump on the ranked choice voting thing, because then if we start making everybody's second who just goes out there and votes third party or doesn't go vote at all because of this, we'll probably win more elections. And we've seen that kind of, in usually pretty red states. It's made Democrats more, at least I believe it's made Democrats more competitive in traditionally red states. Can you speak to that?
I do think Democrats have a lot to gain from this. I think there tends to be a hesitancy from folks in power in that they know how to win elections. And even if in one particular cycle their party is not winning, there always tends to be this optimism like, oh, well, our party's definitely going to win next time, because they believe they know how to win under the current system. We know how to mobilize voters and get our message out there. And there's this fear that ranked choice voting changes the game enough that they wouldn't know how to win. They wouldn't know like the tricks in order to get over 50%, which they currently don't need to do. I think there's a class of political strategists and campaign consultants who are a little nervous about, well, would my advice still be good under ranked choice voting? The answer for the most part is yes. Like, don't have your candidate go so negative, but generally the person who wins the most first choices tends to go on to win in ranked choice voting. And so a lot of the standard campaign tactics of like mobilizing your base of voters, getting out the vote, that stuff tends to still be true in ranked choice voting. But folks who are winning under the old system tend to maybe be the last on board with changing the system.
That just makes sense.
Right, barriers to entry and all that, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, like, we talk about ranked choice voting all the time because we feel like it's one of the potential remedies to this sort of dysfunctional democracy that we see today, where political spending plays an enormous role in one's popularity and how many votes they get. Corporations versus just people in general. We feel like it's definitely an arrow in the quiver. Is there anything else? Obviously, ranked choice voting is big, but tell us more about proportional representation, because I know that's part of your guys' Fair Representation Act, and just give us the rundown with that, because that's newer to me even. I think within the last 6 months, Jordan told me about something proportional. I was like, what is that even?
Yeah, proportional representation I see as kind of the next level. So level one is getting ranked choice voting. But even if you got ranked choice voting everywhere, and I think that we should, there would still be some things we're stuck with. Like, ranked choice voting doesn't solve gerrymandering. I think within a gerrymandered district, ranked choice voting will get you a better campaign and a better winner, but you're still in a gerrymandered district where a lot of voters are locked out, where you have, problems with racial gerrymandering, with partisan gerrymandering. In order to get out of that kind of problem, that zero-sum game, that's where proportional representation comes in. And so a lot of the proposals for proportional representation right now, including the Fair Representation Act, which is in Congress, this would make multi-member districts out of Congress. So instead of having 435 districts that elect one person each, the districts would get bigger and they would elect multiple people each. An ideal number is 5. 5 representatives from each district. And remember, the districts are bigger, so you can do this without expanding the size of the House, or you could expand it if you wanted to. It works either way. But imagine if your district had 5 representatives. Right now, no matter how much diversity of thought exists within a district, only one person represents that district. They're often elected without even a majority support, and then they go, and that's it. That's the only voice. And a lot of us are what I call locked out of representation. We live in a district that it's a safe district for one party, but we support the other party, and so nobody's taken our call, right? They don't want to hear from you at a town hall. They don't want you to come by their office. A lot of us are locked out of representation right now, and no one is championing our interests. Proportional representation solves that problem, gets us a fair balance among the parties, and it creates a lot more opportunities for women and for people of color to really get to the proportional levels.
So this would be redistricting?
Yeah. I'm sorry, would you ask that again?
This would just be redistricting, like you would take our current congressional districts and expand them into larger geographic spaces while keeping, potentially the same number of representatives.
Yeah, and then you also have to change how you vote within those districts, because you're trying to elect 5 people instead of one person. So ranked choice voting works great for this, but instead of eliminating candidates until one person has 50%, you would do it until 5 people all meet the threshold, and the threshold is lower. So the threshold would be way down at like 17% of the vote, which all of a sudden becomes inclusive of all sorts of groups that are currently locked out. At a pretty blue district, you might end up with 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, but you have this opportunity for different types of Democrats, kind of this actual big tent party idea, to really be represented instead of just the one. And this also, of course, creates opportunities for communities of color to be able to elect candidates of their choice, kind of at their level of proportionality.
So I've heard that this kind of solves what some people view as the difficulty of ranked choice voting for our populace, in that they believe that Americans are not politically engaged, let's say, enough to understand the differences in ranked choice voting, even though I think, as you stated at the beginning of this, it takes a minute of somebody understanding or, explaining for you to really grasp at least the basics. And that's really all you need to know. But this proportional aspect changes, or it sort of fixes that. If you, let's say, didn't do ranked choice voting, but you had proportional, you sort of get the best of having, multiple people that you maybe would have had to vote for in a primary separately, but now you just vote for them in an open election, and you possibly could still have both of the 2 people that were your 2 favorites. But I don't know how you vote for more than one person there, and that's still plurality type, just one vote, one person. But
yeah, there are a bunch of different ways to do proportional representation. I like the ranked choice voting version, but there are other ones too. You can go as far as just voting for a party instead of voting for the individual people, and then you kind of sort out the seats by party. I really like the ones where you got to vote for individuals. That's important to me, because I don't always trust the party leaders to choose the candidates that I want to choose. And so there's a ton of different ways that the ballot could look, but I think all of them engage voters a little more, because right now we have low turnout internationally anyway compared to other countries, and a key reason people say they don't vote is because they think their vote doesn't matter. Well, proportional representation would make everybody's vote matter, and I think that would help a lot.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that.
Would this extend, do you see this extending to the Senate too? Because this is I guess one of my biggest issues with the way that our government is set up is obviously the House. The House is supposed to be the most representative body within our political system, right? Like that represents your local geography. Only you are allowed to vote for that, or like only the people who live in that geography are allowed to vote for that person. It's based on population in theory, although it hasn't been expanded, so it's not a great system. But you know, you can have geographic little tiny districts that obviously have a lot of people, and then you have like my district is huge. It's bigger than some states, and you know, because we've got fewer people out here. So gerrymandering and everything aside, like the House of Representatives is supposed to kind of be that representative branch, but then the Senate sort of negates everything, right? Every state gets 2 senators regardless of what size their population is, which gives, you know, states like Wyoming more legislative power than states like California. And then on top of that, obviously it's a statewide thing, and I've always wanted to see the Senate expanded to be based on population, but still be statewide voting, if that makes sense. And would you consider that proportional representation as well?
I think if you did that, so if you had more senators from the larger states, then you could use proportional representation with those. I think a problem with messing with the Senate is that it's a lot of that is baked into the Constitution, and you have to change the Constitution. Whereas a lot of these changes to the House of Representatives can just be done by a law, not a constitutional change. And so it's a much easier pathway to change. And I do think eventually we got to be thinking big, but we got to put our reforms in the right order, right? If we can go ahead and change the House, start using proportional representation in one chamber, then our elected officials there become a lot more representative of the people and a lot more responsive to the voters. And you can use that to start making progress on all of the other issues that are important to voters but are currently being ignored. And there's a long list of those.
For sure. No, I definitely feel like it's definitely another, I guess you bring up a good point of like the order of operations. And I guess that's something that we always are debating in our minds when we're like, which thing do we tackle first? Do we tackle Citizens United? Do we tackle gerrymandering, or, you know, proportional representation, or physically how you vote? I feel like that's a tough call because it doesn't seem like any of them are really like making these huge strides that we would hope that they would do.
It's hard, but it's a long game, right? You got to stick with this. And people can make these changes. I will say our ranked choice voting movement is absolutely full of people who used to work on other issues and then it just kept hitting a wall, thinking, well, this is popular, voters are asking for this, and Congress won't take action on this, even though all of their voters want it. And so that's how people end up finding the election reform world, to say, well, okay, how do we make Congress actually listen to the people? And that might be step one.
Right. What's the organization, Jordan? Is it fairrepresentation.org? I think I had it on the last episode, but they talk about specifically like that line, whatever, 30% of 30% chance of any bill getting passed, no matter of the average support of Americans.
Yeah, it's almost like something other than voter preferences is what's driving all of our politics.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so I guess the biggest obstacles, obviously, to implementing, there's a lot of obstacles to implementing this. One of the commenters, and honestly a note I had in here, was talking off of what we got before. As many people just don't seem to get it. And it's always kind of the argument is that the system's too complicated for it to work in the United States, because Americans are just really fucking stupid. And I want to have more faith in our constituents than that, but again, now talking to people about it, it does kind of seem like people have struggle to grasp it. That's obviously going to be one of the obstacles. How has it kind of been received, do you think, by people who have been using it? You do a lot of research. Your organization does a lot of research on this, right? So you can kind of speak authoritatively, I would assume, on the reception of ranked choice voting when people do get it.
Yeah, people who have used it really like it. They say they like it better than their previous system and they want to keep it. It's used in Minneapolis, where 76% of people say that they like it, and New York City, 77%. We don't have that many other issues where you're getting more than 3/4 of voters or 3/4 of users of anything saying, yes, more of this, please. I am sympathetic to this question about whether it's complicated. I don't think Americans are stupid. I don't think we're stupider than like the people that use this in other countries. Australians do this. Irish people do this. We can do this. I do think we are disengaged. And I think that's an issue for people. They're thinking, well, I know how to rank things. Ranking is as easy as 1, 2, 3, but do I have opinions about 3 different candidates? And it does kind of ask voters to do that, to say, yeah, actually take a look at all of your candidates and pick a top 3.
The smallest amount of civil engagement.
Right.
Yeah, just seems like a big ask.
Well, look, our kids can do this. I don't know. Do either of you two have kids?
No.
No, I don't either, but I do have some nephews, school age. If you ask a 6-year-old for their favorite superhero, you're not going to get one superhero. You're going to get a ranked list of their top 10 favorites, right? Someone who's paying attention can rank their top 5 choices.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things, too, where it's a situation of hearing it versus actually just doing it. And I think that there'd be some grumbling if we decided to just roll this out en masse across the United States. There'd be some grumbling the first couple elections about it, because people are resistant to change and learning new things. But once you start doing it, I really feel like it would be pretty easy to click for people. And I do think they would get it. But
so
again, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess since we're on the note of like explaining it and how Americans can pick up on it, I feel like the New York election here is pretty hot on our heels. Obviously, it's very close to upcoming, and we have some at least 2 people then in the Democratic primary that are really close. It seems. I checked the recent polls, and Chris Cuomo, or is it Andrew Cuomo? One of the
Andrew,
Cuomos. Yeah. Andrew Cuomo is at like 36%, and Mamdani is at about 34%, and then you kind of go down from there. So, like, let's say if that's the results, Cuomo 36, Mamdani 34, Lander 13, Adams 8, and you got like 8% remainder. If that's the first round, so then basically, is it like the lowest person that gets cut off immediately in the runoff, or is it like less than 1%? Like if you only get like, a 0.5%, you just cut all the people that get 0.5%, or like how many rounds would you need to go if you have like 10 people?
The typical way to do it is eliminate one candidate at a time. Now, of course, this is done by computer, and the whole thing is like, it's a matter of a couple of seconds. But yeah, it goes through rounds and eliminates one at a time. Some places, including New York City, allow for some candidates to be eliminated in a batch. Like if all of the candidates at the bottom, if the sum of all of their votes is less than the candidate right above them, then even if you eliminate them all at once, it can't possibly change the outcome. And so you're allowed to kind of eliminate that whole batch. But sure. Mathematically, it comes out like eliminating one at a time.
Okay.
And I like the one at a time because I like to see where the votes go. Like, oh, if this candidate's got 5%, when she's knocked out, like, ooh, where do her people go? I like to see it.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure the people consultants that want to know who people are voting for and what people are talking about really care about that stuff as well. So like in this case, so if if they're roughly 50-50 for, let's say, everybody remaining, the remaining 30% ish of people that didn't vote for Cuomo or Mamdani, like it's basically going to come down to those 2 people, and then how many people also had one of them as their, next tiered choice.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to how many people are listening to these campaign messages. Like all of these campaigns are out there saying, oh, rank me first and don't rank this other person. And so we'll see how much voters are tuned into that, I think. The voters' best strategy is to rank honestly. There's this big don't rank Cuomo campaign going on right now. And for voters who don't like him and don't want him to be mayor, that's the right messaging. Don't put him on your ballot if you don't like him. But for voters that do like him, they're not going to listen to that message. And so we'll see, I think, how much that gets out there in the electorate. I will say,
Sure.
New York used to have runoff elections in their primaries. So before they adopted RCV, if you had an election like this, where the leader only gets, 30-something%, they would hold a primary runoff. Like 3 weeks later, everybody would go back. It would cost millions of dollars. People would vote again between the top two candidates, and turnout would drop by more than half. So New Yorkers have always wanted a majority winner from these primaries. They just used to do it with the delayed runoff, and then it wasn't really working because nobody wanted to show up a second time. So the people showing up to make this actual decision was a much smaller group of people. And so it was like, how can we kind of get that same majority winner just in one round? Just make people vote once.
Right. I've heard people say that it would cost more, at least up front, for a government to establish, databases, all the ERP software that, whatever you need to actually tabulate the votes and whatnot. But I imagine, especially in states that have a runoff situation, you make up that cost real quick with not having to hire or, bring on volunteers and just basically do the whole reorganization thing in 2 weeks to get it ready to go again, much less the voter turnout aspect of like engagement is already pretty low. So let's not give it the chance of getting even lower.
Yeah, for sure.
I
And we
imagine
do
the
want to be
long-term
upfront.
benefits.
Like there are implementation costs. It kind of depends on what sort of election infrastructure you're starting with. Some places can do this really cheaply. Other places have to do bigger investments to kind of get everything up to speed for this. But you do tend to see really big benefits, and especially if you're eliminating runoffs, it absolutely pays for itself after a couple election cycles.
So then, have you had to do any research, answer any questions about voter trust in systems like this? Because obviously there's been a lot of questions called on trust in our elections over the past decade or so, and now changing a system, getting more computers involved, more math involved, which is scary because Americans and all that.
Math literacy issues.
Yeah. I see potential for people to be uncomfortable with this just from a trust standpoint of, is this are there more cracks in this system for people to get in and potentially influence the outcome of an election other than what the voters wanted? And then have you seen that, heard that from people, kind of detractors to the system, and how do you quell their fears?
We have seen some parts of the election integrity crowd kind of start coming after ranked choice voting. It tends to be the same folks who are saying like only hand counting, no machines at all. And then, of course, they're kind of tying these things together. But in general, ranked choice races run using the same software as non-ranked choice. So, if a jurisdiction is using election software from like the major manufacturers like Dominion or ES&S, these are ranked choice compatible, and you would run your results with the same software and using all of the same practices. So it has, I think, all of the same strengths that our election administration system currently has. One of the things I've learned since starting this job is just how good our election administrators tend to be at getting things right. I mean, their checklists, like for processing election returns, are huge. They have so many little things that they have to do to get it right. And they're a group of people who care a lot about their jobs, and they do a really good job. And so implementing ranked choice voting adds to that checklist, but basically most of the checklist stays the same. And these are folks who know how to get that job done. One of my favorite things, most ranked choice places, including New York City, they release the full ranking data after the election, anonymized in order to protect voter privacy. But people like me can look at that data file and, kind of see where all of these ballots are transferring, see how many people ranked multiple candidates, see if there are like certain precincts in the city that had different preferences or that ranked more candidates than other precincts, and really dive into that data. And so for me, I just want to play with that. I want to see what trends I can find in there. But for election integrity folks, what they're getting out of that is a higher degree of transparency than what you get in choose one elections, because here's all the data. Take a look, verify it.
I like that. Have you noticed, do you have a lot of problems with people not ranking more than one candidate when they go in looking at that data? Sorry, just, it's not a planned question, just something you brought up right now and made me think of it.
Yeah, about 70% of people will rank multiple candidates and 30% will rank just one. I wouldn't call that a problem. That's, voter expression, especially because, you think about a campaign like this Don't Rank Cuomo campaign. If a voter doesn't like a candidate, then they should not rank them because, if your top choice gets eliminated, your vote's going to go count for them. I think for most people, when it comes down to it, they say, oh, I really don't like any of these three candidates. Well, okay, if you were stuck with one, though, don't you actually have a preference? And so that's why, a lot of people do end up ranking most of the candidates. But if you just rank one, your vote still counts for that one, just like it would in any other election, unless that candidate is eliminated. And then you're exactly where you would have been without ranked choice voting, right? You voted for not a front runner, and so you don't get to weigh in between the two front runners.
For sure. And is there anything, you said that your position is basically to review sort of the ongoing efforts of RCV across the nation. What's kind of the biggest, newest trend that you're seeing, or what's kind of the most exciting part of what's happening right now?
Okay, the most exciting part for me is when it gets boring. When a place uses it for the first time, it's like ranked choice voting is the story, and everyone's like trying to figure out, oh, is this going to change everything? But after a city or a state has used it for a couple of cycles, the technical aspects of like, oh, how are the ballots counted, like just fades into the background because people get it and people are used to it, and it's not the story anymore. So I always like looking at, how many people are ranking. I like making little maps of where ranking usage happens the most. And that's always interesting for me. But when the news stories aren't about ranked choice voting, that's when it's really set in and that it's just part of the fabric of elections now.
Sure. So I guess looking at the 2024 election, there was a number of states, I think it was like 8 states and DC, had initiatives about ranked choice voting. And unfortunately, we did not see favorable initiatives this time around. I think it was Alaska only maintained their ranked choice voting. And then DC did vote to do ranked choice voting in the limited number of representatives that they have. So I guess that's good, but probably not a huge impact. Do you have any idea sort of what happened, I guess, with 7 of the 8 states not ratifying or continuing ranked choice voting at all?
We did have some setbacks. That's true. We defended ranked choice voting in Alaska, and that kind of ties into this long-term trend where people who have used it like it, but it tends to be a harder sell to people who haven't used it. I think one of the challenges is that established interests pushed back hard in a lot of those states. In some of the states, it was both major parties that came out against this, and that tended to be especially in places where ranked choice voting was combined with open primaries. So where these parties would kind of no longer have control over their own nomination process.
Sure.
And so that caused some pushback. And there's more money opposing this now, as folks are finding that, hey, if you represent a fringe ideology that is maybe winning and is currently punching above their weight, you might be at risk.
I think that really ties into both the question that was asked here in the comments and one I had, but it's the question I guess I had was the biggest obstacles for implementing ranked choice voting. This kind of comes to that chicken or egg, or there's so many things that we can focus on right now with how do we do election reform and where do we prioritize what that we can actually get done, because obviously all of this has to be done incrementally. And then in the comments, somebody asked if what are realistic options for dealing with the conservative states that have preemptively banned RCV. And so that is one of those obstacles. Obviously, if a state goes out of its way to say, we're not even considering doing it. We are banning it in case you ever do try to consider doing it. What are the major obstacles that you're seeing right now with adopting it and implementing it and getting it as a more mainstream system?
Right now, a big part of our map is not places where we can get big wins in the immediate future, because there are a number of states that have preemptively banned ranked choice voting. In particular, states where nobody is using it. And so, you know, these legislators are spending their time banning something that doesn't exist in their state. Like, this is political theater, right? This isn't delivering for their voters. But in those areas, it's a long game. So we are passing it in more cities and states that are open to it, and kind of building up the body of evidence that this works well and that voters are asking for this. And so long term, the path to full RCV adoption involves overturning those bans. So you can do that when you elect new legislators. Vote out the people who are wasting your time, wasting their own time by going after reforms that are good for voters and that currently aren't even doing anything in their states where ranked choice is not used. And so that's the long-term move there. These bans were passed by people in the state legislatures. They can be undone the same way, and I think long-term they will be.
So
sure.
I guess then what in the short term are we looking at then, the next big steps we can take on getting this adopted more? What are kind of the more higher profile? Because obviously this happens in some primaries which aren't a real election as far as electing the actual elected official. In places like New York, it's pretty much, you know, whoever wins the primary is going to be the mayor in that particular situation, and that is the unofficial election, so to speak. But it happens a lot on, I feel like, more localized bases, and those aren't the sexy elections. Like, obviously Alaska is a bigger one, and we're seeing it here.
But it's still Alaska.
Because of mayor. Yeah, it's still Alaska, right? And so, like, yeah, where are the next big win steps to kind of coming over those obstacles? Because obviously getting it passed in local municipalities and things like that is great, but it's not the big sexy wins that kind of get that whole push momentum going behind, you know, getting more people excited and interested in doing it.
I think that those local wins are what provides the momentum. You know, some of these state campaigns from last year were clearly premature because they didn't win. They didn't have enough voter support. What we did learn is that in the cities and counties within those states that already have RCV at the municipal level, those places voted yes to expand it to the state level. And so I think there's a really clear pathway where these local wins show people, oh, it's just a ranked ballot. This is kind of cool. And then you turn local advocates and local champions into state level champions. Right now at the federal level, we're in defense mode more than offense mode. The current administration is unfriendly to this reform. Donald Trump has posted about this. And so
I'm surprised he knows about it, to be honest.
Yeah, you know, I think somebody's whispering in his ear.
Somebody told him to be mad about it. There's zero way he actually understands what it is.
Although, interestingly, he has won electoral votes from ranked choice voting. So, you know, I don't think he wants to give those back.
Okay, explain that to me. How has he won electoral votes from ranked choice voting?
So he has won electoral votes in Maine. Maine tends to go blue, but they split their electoral college votes by congressional district. And so he's won votes in the more conservative district. And then Alaska. You know, these are smaller states, but they can decide the presidency, and he's winning votes in those states.
So Alaska and Maine have ranked choice voting for president as well?
They do, yeah.
Do they have it for Senate?
Alaska's across the board, I think. I don't know if it's also the same thing for Maine.
They both have it for Senate, too. And these are some states that have a long history of having independents in politics, having, like, independent senators. And in other parts of the country, we see those, like, third-party and independent politicians are kind of going extinct at the national level, but this is allowing them to continue to exist in Maine and Alaska.
I think next time we talk to somebody at the DFL, Jordan, we should have them say on the next voting ballot, maybe 2026, whatever, you have to rank your top Minnesota sports team. as a pre-ranked choice voting test, and then they can publish the results for who actually was the most beloved Minnesota sports team. And that's how we start getting at the state level, at least here in Minnesota.
I actually think, you know what? That is not a bad idea. Have you guys considered doing like more creative just ways to get people warmed up to it by doing much lower stake, not doesn't really mean anything type stuff that people get really, behind on, because obviously sports teams are huge.
Yeah, one of my favorites is the beer election. You can go to any local brewery. They would love to, help you host a beer election where you bring a bunch of people in, do little tastings, rank the beers, and then people learn about ranked choice voting. You're driving business to this local brewery. It's a really good win-win for everybody, and one of the tools we absolutely recommend to state and local groups who are like trying to get off the ground with this.
That is brilliant. Look at you over here. You should get political.
Yeah, you should work for a nonprofit that promotes ranked choice voting. I think that's a good spot for you. We have plenty of breweries here in Minnesota, so we could probably make that work. We should have Jazz do it, and well, they already in Minneapolis, Mayor. They already have ranked choice voting, so
yeah.
But he could. His father needs to learn about ranked choice voting still. So
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, I think it would it'd be fun to do it if you could publicize it more. If you could get it again in something that got an entire state involved, or the entire country.
Ooh, I got it. State fair best food for Minnesota.
There we go.
Forget about the sports teams' favorite state fair food. Do it at the state fair, so it's not even part of like an official election. You just every time you show up that one day you get a ballot or something like that. I don't know.
And in order to be a well-informed voter, I mean, you have to get to know the candidates, so you have to go around and try all the foods.
Absolutely.
We get real into our state fair stuff here. No, yeah, we should get Steve Simon on board. Him, our Secretary of State. He's been it was interesting. I got the opportunity to interview him last week, and we've kind of had opinions about Steve Simon's take on ranked choice voting because he's been very slow. He's not against it, at least not publicly. But he hasn't been as embracing of it as like kind of we would like to see. And so I think it'd be fun to get him to like be in the middle of this somehow.
Right, team up with the state fair.
If we can get just blindside him right there. Just like, all right, if we can get Minnesotans to do this, we can just do ranked choice voting statewide. That's what we should do.
I mean,
that's perfect. And look, there is a group in your state. There's a group called FairVote Minnesota that just operates there, and they are trying to do this pathway, going from success at the local level and pivoting that into passing it statewide. And so they are on their way, and they just need a little more to get over the finish line. And so absolutely team up with them to host some state fair elections, beer elections, whatever.
I like that.
I think we might have to do that for sure. If anything, it'll be fun. I'm sure we can get a brewery to host something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all right. Then maybe we can get the brewery to just have that extension on to providing us beer for the podcast.
There you go. So I guess Jordan, do you have anything on topic that you still had a question on? Because I have a question that's it's sort of related, but I just wanted to see if you had anything really on point.
So I guess sort of. I guess I was under the impression that this couldn't really be done on a federal level for something like presidential race, but clearly it can be because Alaska and Maine are doing it. So to get ranked choice voting at a federal level for the presidency, all you'd have to do is get each individual state to adopt that system as their voting method for president, and we would have it. Like that's all it would have to be. There's no constitutional amendments that would have to be changed to implement this or anything along those lines.
States totally get to decide how they want to allocate their electoral college votes. The electoral college is baked into the Constitution, but your state can totally use ranked choice voting for their own electors. And I don't know if you all have talked on the podcast about the National Popular Vote Compact. I don't want to open up a whole new can of worms.
Nick
so you can do that with ranked choice voting too. Yeah, so if that passes, if that goes into effect, they just need a few more states, then you can absolutely use ranked choice voting as the metric to like figure out who wins the popular vote and gets all those votes. So it works either way, if you keep the Electoral College or if you abolish the Electoral College.
Or loophole abolish it with the interstate compact.
Yeah, totally.
How many more states do we need now? I know our state signed on to it, and then I mean it was really big. There was a lot of talk about it, at least in our circles, before the election, and then obviously it peters out because people only care about these things for 6 months before a presidential election. It seems like, and then everybody forgets about caring about electoral problems.
Well, there's a lot of interstate compacts. I didn't realize that this was like a huge thing, but there's a bunch of them that are. There's an adult offender supervision one. Let's just stick to voting here.
Yeah, let's not go too far down the rabbit hole there.
National popular. So as of May, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the East. There's what, like 12, 15 states that have enacted it. It's like 38% of the Electoral College. And then there's another 19 that is pending. I don't know on what, but maybe that's just in their next time they vote, they'll get to decide. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that they are kind of close. They only need 1 or 2 big states or, like 4 or 5 medium states. So they definitely have a path forward.
Yeah, it looks like Texas is the biggest that's pending currently. With 40 electoral votes.
Passing that though,
it's going to be interesting.
It's become so polarized on partisan lines now. It's a little tough to keep making progress in any kind of bipartisan way.
Republicans haven't. I mean, if Republicans had to go by popular vote, they wouldn't have had a president in the last 30 years win an election.
Yeah,
so I don't really see. I don't really.
Definitely hasn't been a Republican loser of the Electoral College yet. It's been pretty one-sided, going back to 1875 or something like that. Well, so in the vein of, if you're going to change the way that we vote and cast our votes. I've heard a lot of different scoring, or my favorite is the star method. I don't know. I'm sure you've heard of it. Do you feel, I guess two-parter. What do you think of the star method? And do you feel like we should go all in if we're going to change the way that we do it? Just change it one time to the most effective voting method, and one that does runoff and score, versus just doing something that's still much, much better than plurality, but possibly, people like to poke small, little tiny, it's actually not the greatest at this one particular aspect. I think it's still they're 1 and 2 in my book, but how do you feel about that?
So the most important thing is that any of these alternative proposed methods are a lot better than the status quo. So I'm absolutely not going to come on here and trash star voting or any other method. I think it's a good idea for localities to pursue the ones that they can pass. Viability matters a lot here, and sometimes you have to sacrifice whatever you think is the most perfect method in order to get something that, hey, your city council president can get on board with and endorse, right? And so far, I think in the past that has been ranked choice voting, but I think there are opportunities everywhere. And I wouldn't try to squash any other campaign. In terms of long term, I think we have to get to some kind of proportional representation. Obviously, I've chosen to spend my career working on ranked choice voting. So, I mean, that's the one that this is the horse I'm betting on. And a big part of that is because I think that it nicely paves the way to proportional representation in a way that I think is most feasible. And so there's pros and cons to all of these methods, but all of them really, really outperform what we're doing now. So we got to get out there and make some change.
Yeah, I think I saw plurality voting as somebody graded voting methods, and plurality was a D or something like a D
What voting method did they
minus.
use to vote on the voting methods?
That's I think they use some sort of meta scale against all to which I'm sure for somebody like yourself and somebody like us, it was a little nerd out to look at it all and like see, oh, actually, there's a way in this category. It didn't really work that great, so that one's maybe not the greatest. But like ranked choice voting and Star, they were like set like 80 and 90%. Like these, it most accurately represents what voters actually want. I think was what the scale was supposed to reflect.
They do have some similarities in that both of them want voters to be able to express more than one preference, right? You want voters to, we all know, oh, I love this candidate, I like these, I could live with these, I don't like that one. And so how do you translate that into a ballot and into a decision-making process?
For sure.
So I guess to kind of figure out where you're coming from and where you're going, when did the organization get its start? How long have you guys been doing what you're doing? And what are your specific next steps in trying to reach these goals?
So we have been around since 1992. Believe it or not, I was not working at FairVote in 1992. I was busy, with elementary school back then. And so we started out as Citizens for Proportional Representation. And so that has been a key goal all along. And we used to work on a lot more issues, but over the last decade, we've really narrowed into just ranked choice voting and proportional. Like we used to work on national popular vote work, but we kind of decided we can have more impact where we really focus on these couple of reforms that we know can pass and can like transform elections and transform policymaking in practice. And so this is where we're putting the efforts. So our whole org strategy is 3 pillars: build, win, and sustain. One of the things we've learned is that once you start winning, there's going to be opposition, right? So we're getting more pushback. And so sustaining our wins has become increasingly important. Defending against folks who maybe want to roll it back, like what happened in Alaska. And of course, we were able to defend because once people have used it, they like it. But this does take some effort to keep putting out, keep publishing the results from these ranked choice voting elections and showing how it's helping people in practice. So our work going forward: building, that means helping start up new campaigns, helping build more support for these, often building towards either ballot questions or trying to win through a legislature or city council. So that's building. Then winning, it's obvious, and then sustaining. So we try to make sure we're doing all 3 of those things.
Yeah, I guess I think of it like the way you're describing it. It's what we tell third-party candidates to do. Like if you're the Green Party, we always tell them, don't shoot for the presidency, shoot for your local, your state offices and build up a base in Congress so that when you eventually somehow make it to presidency, you actually have people around you that will support you because you're not on an island. It kind of seems like that's the strategy you're shooting for.
For sure. And it's just really hard to get a third party really going in the US right now because our election system disincentivizes it, right? Like even with the Green Party might be running a really strong candidate with a good platform that's connecting with people, and then everyone who likes them is shamed. They are told, oh, don't waste your vote, don't throw your vote away. And so, I think that support for independent and third parties, it looks artificially low. Not that many people are voting for them, but I think there are more people out there who maybe would like to if we had an election system that kind of allowed you to do that.
I'd
Sure.
definitely say that there's a solid third of the country that does not feel accurately represented by the party that they vote for. I don't think that would be unreasonable. It's hard to find anybody who's really thrilled about party politics these days, unless they wear a red hat. So I do think that it probably would have a lot more third party voters if it wasn't, again, throwing their vote away. Because in reality, at this point, it is throwing their vote away. I mean, they hate when we tell them that, but that's the truth. At least on a presidential scale. On local stuff, you can absolutely win as a third party. It's still an uphill battle in our current system, but yeah, on electoral, presidential politics, it's not.
Yeah.
reasonable to think that a third-party candidate is going to be competitive.
Yeah, and I would imagine that you guys are really looking forward to, a possible Democratic House of Speaker of the House that would get the Fair Representation Act out of committee and possibly voted upon here ever.
We would like to see this bill get more attention. Yes.
Yes, though I would think it would be difficult to imagine that getting any attention before 2026. But hopefully it doesn't get negative attention until that, and we do get a potentially more favorable Congress to weigh in. So.
And there's progress you can make at any time, right? I don't think we are passing our bill this session, but we can keep making progress. We can be having conversations. We can get new co-sponsors to sign on. We can develop new champions who not just support the bill, but want to use some of their political capital to get their colleagues to support the bill. We can work on getting support across the aisle. We are doing that. We're having those conversations, but that hasn't quite materialized just yet.
Who do you guys have, in the House that's highly supportive of that? I have obviously I can't remember that.
Don Beyer and Jamie Raskin have been the big champions who keep carrying this bill for us for the last couple of sessions, and it has about another half dozen co-sponsors who are working on it. But we need half of the House eventually to vote yes on this, and we're on the way, but it's going to take some work.
For sure. I would think that AOC and Maxwell Frost, those would be, progressive candidates that would be just really in for that as well.
Easy sell. Ilhan Omar, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Definitely on the list of conversations we're having. So hoping that we can lock those in soon.
Well, I hope you can lock them in too. Absolutely.
We were really excited about the work you're doing. Like I said, it's been a long time that we have been citing your work, learning about ranked choice voting from the work that you've done, and then citing that as we've kind of shared that here. So having you on has been a really incredible opportunity for us just to have this opportunity, because we are passionate about it. We'd love to see these kind of reforms, and these are tangible reforms. A lot of the things, we would love to see Citizens United done away with, but that's a Supreme Court decision that we don't have any tangible way to affect change on right now. We'd love to see the Electoral College done away with or reformed to be more representative, but again, that's baked into the Constitution and has a lot more obstacles to get there. And ranked choice voting is something that it can happen at your local level, it can happen at your state level, and as that keeps rolling out, it's something that will continue to grow federally, and so it's something that we've been pushing a lot, and I'm just incredibly appreciative that you and the rest of the people at FairVote have been dedicating their careers to see that end. So thank you so much for doing that and being on here to talk about it.
And thank you. I really appreciate that you have been reading and using our work. It's so great to hear that. Appreciate your time today. And you really queued up a nice little call to action there, saying that, individual people, individual citizens are making this change happen. And every campaign that we have won, we're in 2 states and 50 cities now, so it's a lot of campaigns. It is always because of active local activists who want to make it happen and are willing to get out there and do it. And so it is feasible when we work on it.
That is really great call to action for everybody out there who does want to see these things as much as we do. Please get out there. And the tricky thing is, unfortunately, every state has different rules and every locality has different rules about it. And even in our state, where some localities it's allowed, others it's not, and it's a frustrating thing to try to navigate. But don't let that discourage you guys. Just continue to push through and just tell your local representatives that this is what you want, and keep pushing on it. And then FairVote has a lot of great resources and information to help you kind of navigate that. And do you have a local state level organization in every state currently?
We have them in almost every state. And so in your state, there is a FairVote Minnesota. There are ones in most of the states. You can find a list of those on our website. We're at fairvote.org. So connect with the folks already trying to do this in your state, and you'll learn a lot about what are the pathways? You know, in some states you can have a ballot question, in some states you can't, and they're doing something else. And so those local leaders are going to know how to plug you in a way that you'll feel connected to the community and feel like you're able to make a difference. And it's a pretty great feeling.
That is awesome.
We'll definitely have to reach out to FairVote Minnesota, because I think if we can lend our platform to that, we're doing the thing, you know.
Absolutely. And then I guess you're a nonprofit organization. You got to keep the lights on somehow, and you need manpower to do all this stuff. So how can people, shameless plug away, how can people, you know, help you guys out?
We are a nonprofit, and we exist totally based on donations from individuals and foundations. So fairvote.org, you'll find a big old donate button if you want to support us. Help us keep the lights on and help us keep these campaigns going around the country so we can keep winning.
Awesome. And then getting involved volunteering wise, is it just best to reach out to local people, or what kind of manpower resources do you guys need?
The best way to get involved is to reach out to your local groups. There are some that are in the stages of like mobilizing people to go like door knocking, or go do tents at community festivals, or host beer elections in their towns. And so the local leaders will be able to tell you kind of what stage they're at and where they most need bodies.
That is awesome. Well, thank you again so much for all the work that you're doing, and never hesitate to reach out if we can help platform any of the stuff that you guys have going on. You know, when the bills do finally make it out of committee and to the floor, if we can help beat that drum to get a little bit more public support for it, we'd be happy to do that, because we definitely want you guys to be successful, because I think it'll make us all successful here as a country. So thank you
so
again.
much for your support. We really appreciate that.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
no,
thank you.
It was a pleasure. No, it was a pleasure, and obviously, I'm just appreciative of you guys reaching out and getting this all set up. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who tunes in every week and gives us a little bit of your time so we can talk to great guests like this, and hopefully you guys learn something. The best way you can support us, obviously, is just listening or watching, but if you guys want to support us financially as well, you can do that via a subscription here on YouTube or on Patreon. We also have merch for sale, offyourwagon.com, both my personal merch and Let Them Eat Toast merch. And there's just ways to send us money in the link tree at the top of any of my social profiles. So we appreciate that. Helps us keep the lights on as well. But please do go check out fairvote.org. If you've got questions about ranked choice voting, they will be answered there. And I promise it's not nearly as scary or complicated of a system as you think it is. And it is something that can really make your vote count much more than it does right now. Thank you all again, and we will see you next week. Thanks for being on, Deb.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.